In the earliest years of the faith, Yeshua's followers' gatherings were not impressive by worldly standards. They did not fill marble halls or basilicas. They met in homes, courtyards, shaded gardens, and rented rooms. Their gatherings were simple but filled with covenant loyalty. They shared food, prayed with ordinary words, sang psalms they already knew, and read aloud the stories of Yeshua and the letters from the Shalayachim who had gone before them. They laid hands on the sick, cared for widows and orphans, and sold what they had so no one would lack. They didn't just discuss ideas about faith, they lived it as a covenant family. We have traced how that center of gravity shifted, first toward Greek philosophy, then into imperial decrees and canon law, then into scholastic systems, Reformation debates, Enlightenment rationalism, and the fractured modern world. The question now is this: what if the church today aimed to return to its origin? What if the path was restored to its original trail? The first-century covenant walk was shaped by time. Believers rose to pray at designated hours. They fasted together. They remembered the resurrection on the first day of the week. They rested in the rhythm of the Sabbath, not as a legal burden, but as a covenant gift. Time was not random. It was structured by Yahweh's covenant. Today, our time is fragmented by schedules, screens, and demands for productivity. A return would mean resisting the tyranny of the clock. Churches would relearn the rhythm of Sabbath rest, not just as a personal retreat, but as a communal pause, a declaration that Yahweh is the true master of time. Daily prayer could be woven into households, not just cathedrals, morning and evening, the day marked by thanksgiving and intercession. Communities could reintroduce shared fasts, where the lack of food reminds us that man does not live by bread alone. Technology might support this, but it cannot replace the embodied rhythm itself. To restore covenant walk means to restore covenant time. For the first disciples, the table was the heart of community. Bread was broken, the cup shared, and lives connected. The Lord's Supper was not just a symbol or a routine disconnected from everyday life. It was a covenant meal where forgiveness was given, resources were shared, and promises were renewed. Today, the table is often silent, ritualized, or reduced to a quick symbol. To return would be to recenter the shared meal. Churches could gather around real tables, where communion is not swallowed in isolation, but shared face to face. Meals could stretch long, with laughter, tears, prayers, and songs woven between courses. Bread and cup would be covenant signs, but so would the casserole offered to the sick family, the loaf shared with a neighbor, the feast given to the poor. The table would once again become the place of hospitality, reconciliation, and covenant loyalty. In Jerusalem, believers pooled their resources, sold land, and laid the proceeds at the apostles' feet. In Corinth, the wealthier were rebuked for eating separately from the poor. Covenant economy was not capitalism baptized, it was family responsibility. In modern churches, money often flows like dues to support programs, buildings, and salaries. Going back to the beginning would mean restoring generosity as covenant loyalty. Congregations could create funds for widows, refugees, and debt relief. Communities could form cooperatives, share tools, or open their homes. Some might practice common ownership or community land trusts. The point is not uniformity, but responsibility. In the covenant household, no one goes hungry, homeless, or alone. In first-century gatherings, leaders were not managers or CEOs. They were shepherds recognized for their faithfulness. Elders were chosen because they protected their households well, lived with integrity, and could guide with humility. They were not distant administrators, but present fathers and mothers in the faith. Today, leadership is often professionalized, judged by education, charisma, or organizational skill. To revert to a different view would mean reimagining leadership as covenant stewardship. Leaders would be those who model the walk, protect the weak, reconcile the estranged, and feed the flock. Authority would rest not in titles, but in lives lived faithfully. To lead would be to bear more weight, not to sit higher. The shepherd's staff would be given to those who walk most closely with the shepherd. The first believers were not known for their eloquent arguments. They were known for their lives. "See how they love one another," neighbors said. They welcomed abandoned infants, cared for the sick during plagues, and endured persecution without fighting back. Their walk of faith was its own proof. Today, the church is often viewed as divided, politicized, or irrelevant. A renewal would mean allowing embodied faithfulness to become the testimony once again. Churches could be recognized for hosting refugees, practicing honesty in business, fostering reconciliation across ethnic lines, showing courage in suffering, and demonstrating generosity in poverty. Such covenant loyalty would outshine slogans. It would cause neighbors to ask once more, "Who are these people, and why do they live this way?" First-century discipleship was learned through daily life. Faith was gained not from lectures, but from walking alongside others. Talmudim followed their rabbi, not just to hear words, but to imitate actions. Early Christians continued this tradition. New believers were encouraged to follow the pattern of prayer, fasting, almsgiving, and worship by observing older brothers and sisters. Today, discipleship is often limited to classroom settings, focused on courses, or just transferring information. To go back would mean restoring formation through imitation. Older believers would invite younger ones into their homes, demonstrating covenant life at the table, in work, and in service. Children would grow up witnessing faith in action, not just hearing explanations. The covenant walk would once again be handed down like a trail map, marked by footsteps rather than lecture notes. Such a return will not be easy. Modern churches are shaped by centuries of habit, professional clergy, large buildings, program-driven schedules, consumer expectations. The shift would require courage, patience, and sacrifice. It might mean smaller gatherings, simpler liturgies, and more ordinary settings. It might mean resisting cultural pressures for spectacle and efficiency. Even now, fragments of renewal are emerging. House church movements in many nations emphasize shared meals and simple gatherings. Intentional communities experiment with communal living, shared resources, and daily prayer. Some congregations are reclaiming Sabbath rest, not as legalism, but as liberation. Urban monasteries blend ancient rhythms with modern mission. Justice-focused churches link covenant faithfulness to advocacy for the poor, racial reconciliation, and creation care. Talking about restoration isn't about nostalgia. The goal isn't to repeat the first century exactly, but to reclaim its essence, a covenant walk that is real, shared, and true. Yeshua's call remains the same. Take on the yoke, deny yourself, love each other as I have loved you. The center of gravity has shifted many times, into philosophy, law, reason, and institutions, but the covenant walk still awaits beneath our feet. To restore the center is to step back onto the trail, shoulder to shoulder, bound by covenant love, sustained by covenant signs, led by the shepherd who still calls, "Follow me." The question for us is simple and profound. Will we walk this path again? Consider this. The first disciples faced misunderstanding, persecution, and poverty. Reflect on brothers and sisters in Africa and China, known for their strong faith, who face hate, persecution, and poverty. Israel was led into exile for breaking covenant. Where will the results of the Western Church's choices lead us? Is there an answer hidden in the book of Revelation?